Remember when once upon a time, video game prices would actually depreciate? Game console prices would actually go down over the years and not go, up? Well, seemingly that is just a remnant of a bygone era, because over the last few months, we have seen Nintendo raise prices, we have seen Xbox raise prices, and now PlayStation is joining the fray. On August 20th, 2025, PlayStation released the following blog post titled PlayStation 5 Price Changes in the US, and it reads as follows. New prices effective starting on August 21st, 2025. So tomorrow, as of the recording of this video, if you're planning to get a PlayStation 5 at its MSRP before that goes up, now's the time to do it. It reads right here. Similar to many global businesses, we continue to navigate a challenging economic environment. As a result, we have made the difficult decision to increase the recommended retail price for PlayStation 5 consoles in the US starting on August 21st. The updated recommended retail price for PlayStation 5 consoles in the US are as follows. And I hate when companies do this. Anytime there's a price increase, they won't tell you what the old price was. They just tell you what the new price is. So there's no point of comparison. But right now, if you go to the PlayStation 4 and look at console prices, they are at their default MSRP, and we can compare them to the new prices. So right here we have a regular PlayStation 5 at $550 compared to what it was before, $500. Then we have PlayStation 5 Digital Edition, which is now $500, whereas before it was $450. And last but not least, we have the PlayStation 5 Pro, which is now $750, whereas before it was $700. So effectively, all of the PlayStation 5 SKUs have gone up by $50 in America. I'll be honest with you, I'm not shocked at all. This was just a matter of time, with plenty of other companies having raised prices, especially where electronics are concerned. And this follows directly after Nintendo and Xbox's price increases. Recall that as Nintendo Switch 2 was nearing its launch, following tariff announcements, Nintendo increased price points for all of their accessories. And right here we can see that, for example, the Switch 2 Pro controller went from the original MSRP of $80 to $85. Joy-Con 2 pairs went from $90 to $95, and that has since gone up by an additional $5. It's now $100. So on and so forth. You can see the full list right here. And then beyond that, recently, while Nintendo has maintained the price points for the Nintendo Switch 2, though I imagine that there's a strong chance those will go up in price in the not-so-distant future, Nintendo Switch 1 prices have gone up, as announced here on August 1st, 2025, where Nintendo said that pricing for the original Nintendo Switch family of systems and products will change in the United States based on market conditions effective August 3rd, 2025. And it was also around this time that Nintendo Switch 2 accessories went further up in price. That's when Joy-Cons went from the already increased price of $95 to $100. And we're talking about some pretty significant price increases. The Switch OLED went from $350 to $400. The non-OLED version went from $300 to $340, and the Switch Lite went from $200 to $230. And then finally, we have Xbox, who announced price changes on May 1st, 2025. Not only did they announce that they're planning to make some of their first-party releases $80, much like how Nintendo made Mario Kart World $80, and they essentially kickstarted the $80 priced games movement of essentially increasing the bar. It was already increased from 60 to 70. Now we went from 70 to 80 because of Nintendo. When one major company does it, every other major company feels comfortable to do so because at least they weren't the ones to kick it off. But yeah, they announced right here that Xbox consoles and accessories would be increasing in price, and they increased by a pretty significant margin. So for example, you can see right here that the Xbox Series S 512 gigabytes model went from $300 to $380. For whatever reason, Xbox's price increases were by far the most significant, with PlayStation price increases were all across the board. $50 for the consoles. With Nintendo Switches, at most, we had a $50 price increase. But with Xbox, we're looking at price differences that go from $80. And I mean, if you look at the Xbox Series X 2 terabytes Galaxy Black, we're looking at a price difference of $130, from $600 to $730, alongside all of the various accessories that have gone up in price as well, like the Xbox Wireless Controller Special Edition, which increased by $10. Same thing with the Xbox Wireless Controller Limited Edition, increased by $10. And then the Elite Wireless Controller Series 2 went from $180 to $200. That's a $20 price increase, so on and so forth. All three companies essentially cite market conditions and the economic environment, referring to the tariffs. As Daniel Ahmad highlighted right here, when Nintendo increased prices for the Switch 1 by a significant margin, currently, there's a 20% tariff on Vietnam, a 30% tariff on China, and a 15% tariff on Japan. These are all markets that Nintendo relies on for hardware and software production, and these are regions that other companies like PlayStation and Xbox rely on to manufacture all of the components that are required to create these consoles and all of their accessories. Even Daniel says right here that he wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo ended up raising Switch 2 prices at some point as well. Because, yeah, Nintendo, I think, is holding out because the momentum of the Nintendo Switch 2 is so good. And right now, their focus is to get a big Switch 2 install base. I mean, this console broke records when it comes to sales. It was officially confirmed on August 1st, 2025, that the Switch 2 sold over 6 million units. That is the biggest launch of any video game system ever, and like by a huge margin. But when the opportunity presents itself, I have little doubt that Nintendo will increase Switch 2 prices as well. But yeah, I mean, the bottom line is that so much of video game console production comes from imports. It's all stuff made on an international level, and when it costs more to import stuff or to make stuff abroad, overseas, then, you know, the actual manufacturing costs of each respective console is going to go up by a significant margin. And with companies wanting to, you know, in the case of Nintendo, they want to make a little bit of profit with every console sold. And with the likes of Xbox and PlayStation, who might be, you know, suffering losses with each console sold, but are trying to make up for it with software sales, they still can't suffer too many losses with each unit sold. And so they have to increase the prices to make up for the higher cost of manufacturing. And that's essentially how we got here. This is not just something we're seeing in the games industry. We're seeing this across the board in many industries and areas, especially where electronics are concerned. The thing is, increasing prices after you've set an MSRP is just never good for optics and for sales. It just makes your product less accessible, and it makes the perception surrounding the product just significantly worse in terms of financial accessibility. So it's not something that companies generally try to do. They usually try to like really set that MSRP at a place where everyone feels comfortable, and they try to maintain it there or lower it over time if sales are warranted, if they, you know, need to curb the supply and demand. But regardless of what the reasoning is, it doesn't change the fact that this sucks for just the gaming industry, for gamers, for the masses who, you know, already are finding gaming to be less accessible in an economic situation where things are pretty kind of dire or pretty just in flux. And the fact that games are getting more expensive alongside the consoles, Nintendo pricing Mario Kart World, even the digital edition at $80. Like, it'd be one thing if, for manufacturing reasons, the physical editions had to be a little bit more expensive than the digital versions. Like, I'm willing to eat that cost if it means having proper physical editions of games where all the game data is housed inside the cartridge or inside the disc. But the fact that companies are increasing the prices of digital products that don't require manufacturing, that can be infinitely downloaded, that don't require additional expenditures for distribution, that combined with all these price increases for the actual hardware due to increased manufacturing costs, that's where things just are, it's starting to get out of hand. It doesn't surprise me at all that people are reminiscing about a bygone era when consoles went down in price halfway through their lifespan. And I guess there's a fear that if companies can get away with price increases, if they can continue to sell well with price increases, what if this is a practice they adopt even when tariffs aren't in place? Even if tariffs don't influence those kinds of decisions, what if they just decide to do it because it's worked in past generations that forced their hand to do so, but somehow they still were able to stay afloat or were able to continue this practice and still sell well enough where they could ultimately financially benefit from that. I personally think this is a very unique economic situation. That's ultimately what's causing all of this. But I understand those kinds of fears. But again, generally, companies spend a lot of time coming up with the right MSRP, just the sweet spot where they can make a good amount of money and achieve financial results that are desirable while still making the product, you know, viable and something that is financially, you know, within reach for, you know, as many people as they can make the product within reach, so that they can have a bigger install base and they can just sell more of the product. I personally don't foresee price increases being the norm down the line if the economic environment stabilizes, because again, it's just not good for business or optics. But also, who knows what game companies will try to pull and what boundaries they'll try to push to see how far they can move the goalposts of certain things. But right now, yeah, the big three have all gone ahead and increased prices for their consoles and accessories. Well, I think with PlayStation 5, they haven't announced anything for accessories price increase. Right now, it's just consoles they've announced price increases for. So at least there's that. It feels like among the big three, PlayStation's price increases are, the least worst, if that makes sense. But still, none of this is ideal. None of this is good for the games industry. None of this is good for gamers. None of this is good for anyone, really. If the economy stabilizes and these prices are still maintained, like if, tariffs are diminished and these prices are still maintained, yeah, that'll say a lot about these companies' business practices. But, at the end of the day, what prices are for products, I mean, it's very simple. It really is just supply versus demand. And if the demand still exists at the higher price point, then these companies have no reason to drop these prices because they're getting away with it and people are still buying their stuff. And so we'll see how these price increases ultimately impact sales of game consoles and game software as a whole. But as all of this develops, I'll keep you guys updated. In the meantime, though, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on price increases for PlayStation 5 and what you think the future holds for just prices in the games industry as a whole. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.